if the dressing room can't sort that player out and bring him into line with what they do, if they can't find a common ground with the player, there does always come a point where the team's more important.
Now, there used to be a time when you'd print out the close season program, put it in an envelope, give it to the player. Then they'd leave. Then you'd have to re-give it to the player because he left it strategically behind. So you'd have to go to his house and give it to him again.
On one of the days, I'd spend virtually the whole day trying to sign the player. And there's been players I've tried to sign at the start of the holiday, and literally by the end of the holiday, the players turned us down on the last day, and you're thinking...
So people can choose whether these guys get ahead. So you got Darren Bent, Rob Earnshaw, Ewan Roberts, John Hartson, Scott Parker, Tony Cotty.
All I would say is he only had about 2 defenders in the whole team. So that basically tells. That's why Dave and I work together, because it's the yin and the yang.
Welcome, football fans, to Breaking Lines, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the beautiful game like never before. I'm Gary Rowett, former player and manager, joined by the insightful Dave Carolan, a man with his finger on the pulse of football's beating heart. Together, Dave and I bring you unrivaled insight, context, and a few stories from the trenches. Join us as we dissect the game, break down the plays, and explore the intricate dance between managers, players, fans, and the beautiful game itself. This is Breaking Lines, where the game is more than just a match.
Welcome back to another Breaking Lines podcast, and this week it's an episode from Whistleblowers, where you, our listeners, have sent in your questions to have us answer them on a whole range of topics. And certainly the first episode of Whistleblowers has been really successful, and it's gone down well with lots of people, and feedback's been great. So we're kicking off with another episode of it today, and we're going to continue with the questions. Good morning, Gary. How are you?
Morning, Dave. How are you?
Yeah, life is good here. It's the close season, and of course that means we all have more time, having just watched all of the trophy lifts happening around the country, and we're seeing all of those kind of success stories that have happened, and of course the not so successful ones. So yeah, plenty of time for us. What about you?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I think it's that, like you say, it's that football sort of stops, doesn't it? And then you have a week of, actually, it's quite nice. I haven't got to think about football too much. And then you start getting bored and you start realising that's all you do think about. And so, yeah, here we are, episode 2 of the Whistleblower series. Quite interesting. I'm hoping that, I don't know whether I hope the questions get more controversial or harder to answer. I'm not quite sure whether they remain fairly steady. So, yeah, we'll see. Looking forward to this.
Well, certainly the first question of the day, which we'll kick off with right now, is certainly an interesting one, and it goes straight to the point. It's a question from Joe, and Joe says, how do you deal with a bad egg in the dressing room? We've seen them over the years. We know they exist, but normally we just have to skirt around them in the backroom staff. You as a manager, you've got to deal with them. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing you do is you define what bad egg means, because often, I've tried to sign players and someone said, they're a bad character or they're whatever or they're this, because everyone loves to define someone with one comment, don't they? And I've obviously, there's been a million times where, I've actually worked out why that player is perceived that way. And if you treat them a slightly different way, they're not at all like that. They're really good characters and they're real team players. So I think that's the first thing. You have to define what that means, and you have to try to treat that player how you find them, not how everybody else finds them. Because again, one manager's way of dealing with someone might be very different to the way that I would deal with them, for example. So I think that's the first thing. You have to understand what are the reasons behind people labelling them that way. Then I think you always have to find that, okay, so why are they frustrated or why are they reacting in that way? Is there a better way to deal with them? Is there a better way for them to find their place within the team? For example, if a player's not in the team, some players react really badly to that and can't cope with it. Some players just want to play football. Is that a weakness? Is that a strength? So I think you just have to accept that's how they are. So therefore, if you're signing them, are you signing them to play more often than not? Do you see them as a regular? Because if you don't, you've straight away got a problem. So So I think the parameters of which you use that player within your squad and within your team are also massively important. And then I think sometimes you get to a point with a player where you just realise they are just difficult to deal with and not a team player. And sometimes there comes a point where, if the dressing room can't sort that player out and bring him into line with what they do, if they can't find a common ground with that player, there does always come a point where the team's more important and what you're trying to do is more important. And ultimately, you need players to buy into the group and buy into the culture and buy into the way you work. Otherwise, all you're going to do is just have negativity and have someone that's creating negativity around the place. So yeah, I think first define what do people mean by a bad egg, because everyone's different, aren't they? Every character's different. Everyone has a reason behind, their story and why they react in certain ways. So I think first and foremost, you have to understand that. And then see if you can work with them. And if you can't work with them, we've had players before, haven't we? But there comes a point where you just say, do you know what? We're having the same conversation every day. We're having the same conversation in the staff meeting every morning. And sometimes, I think it was Alex Ferguson who said, if I have a problem, the easiest way to deal with a problem is to remove it from the building. And of course, he often did that from time to time with even top players.
Yeah, and you can do that when you've potentially had a club of that size and that stature where maybe the capability of removing the bad egg, so to speak, is easier in some ways. But if you're in the lower leagues and you've got a bad egg, and maybe moving them on isn't that easy, is it? Because it's not just that they're in your building, but you're trying to move them out to somebody else's building, and they're probably wondering and querying, like, why are they letting this guy go? Especially if it's a talented player. I'm not saying that the other players aren't talented, but quite often you can have a talented player who's maybe got challenges around attitude or application or something. And that's probably part of that definition of what a bad egg is, isn't it? Some people just don't work hard enough. Other people just don't really have the kind of mindset to really comply with maybe the discipline that different managers might instill in the team. And they feel like it's imparting or getting in the way of their ability to be creative and, express themselves, don't they? But obviously another club would be looking at that thinking, well, why are they getting rid of him? Is there something that we need to know? Is there something between the lines here that we need to read?
You sound like you were trying to describe yourself there, Dave. You said suppressing creativity. It sounded like you when you join in one of the sessions, and I tell you've got to pass it back to me because that's what we need them to do.
Yeah, I always find defenders kind of constrain that kind of creativity. But anyway, moving on from that, back to the bad eggs.
Yeah, I think that, again, I've probably only ever had one player I can remember that after signing them very quickly, I realised I had to get them out of the building. Pretty, like within a month, I realised it was a mistake. Sometimes you have to hold your hand up. And I think at that point, particularly lower down, you've got to try and minimise the financial implication of that mistake, because of course you can't afford a costly mistake. So we managed to move that player on quite quickly without losing money. And I can honestly say, I'm trying to think back, I don't think I've ever had to get anybody to train on their own or to train in a small group. Now, I understand why managers do that, but I always think, there's a way around every problem. There's a way of solving every problem. There's an opportunity to try and find a common ground, but of course you can't compromise and deviate too much from what you're trying to do, because we've seen it before, haven't we, where one player can have a material impact on the rest of the players. The rest of
hugely. Yeah.
And you can't allow that player too much leeway, because if you do, that affects all the other players. So there's always that knock-on effect. But for me, the key is always to try and understand that player and understand why they react in a way. And sometimes, I think a lot of people skirt around issues and skirt around certain things. And sometimes you have to just sit a player down and just say, your attitude stinks. Like, why are you doing that? Like, I remember pulling a player once and saying, what would you do if one of your children acted in this way? Like, if you found out at work that one of your kids was constantly late at work. I said, would you be proud of that? And they said, well, no. I said, well, why are you doing that then? Because that's essentially what's going to happen. You're going to accept that's fine and that's okay. So there's different ways around. I'm not saying every player would act in that way, but you're trying to find a reason for that player to change their behaviour, I suppose. And some players will, most players will. You have to also understand that player and show a bit of empathy. And then there's the odd player that just won't do it, and they're just not a good fit for your culture or for you as a manager. And so therefore, at that point, you have to just, stop the battle and move that player on, and that's best for everybody.
I think, so summing it up, in the future for some of these guys, the bad eggs, it would be interesting if they had that normal application form that most people would have when they're applying for any other job, where it said, are you a team player? And if they had to answer it honestly, maybe they couldn't actually go along with that, could they? Well,
again, you've got to do your research when you join, haven't you? And that's why it's important to speak to other managers, speak to other people that have worked with a player, do social media checks, background checks. You've got to try and find as much about. It's interesting today's age, isn't it? That we talk about signing players on data, we talk about signing players around certain metrics, and I think that's vastly important. But I also think you cannot miss the character part. You cannot miss will they fit into the how you work and the dynamic you're trying to create, and you don't always need everybody to be squeaky clean and easy part of that. Sometimes you need something to ignite a little bit of confrontation, don't you? Sometimes you need players that are going to say how it is to drive some of the other players that maybe are a little bit more quiet, but you need to know what that player's about. And I think getting as much information as you can beforehand, usually not from the player, because of course,
no.
If it's a decent contract, they'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. So like most people will.
Absolutely. Well, the one thing we know for sure is pretty much in every dressing room, by and large, there exists somebody who maybe not be a bad egg, but they've got the potential to become one if they feel that they're being compromised and not treated well. So we have to keep our eye on those. And obviously the backroom staff, we try and help with those situations, don't we? We're trying to stop it before they go bad. Anyway, enough on that one. And then we're going to spin off now to a completely different area, which is something from In the Club, who sent this one in. And it relates really to the close season, which is an episode that we're about to do. We're going to be recording really, really soon because obviously we're in the close season. It's how much time do the players get off? What do they and what do we end up doing? What's the expectations around what they have to do while they're off? And how easy is it to switch off? Let's start with that one, really. You as a manager, you've just finished the season. You've gone away to try and have a break. Does the phone get a break?
The phone does not get a break, no. And I think that's the challenge. Usually what happens is, in terms of timescales, you usually get probably a week where it's quite busy at the end of the season, where everyone has the intention to do business. And there's players out of contract and there's players you're trying to keep and retain. And of course, lots of people at the club have those jobs to do that. It's not necessarily just you doing those things, but of course you're a part of it because, if a club offer a player a poor contract, what's the first thing the agent's going to do? The agent's going to ring the manager and he's going to say, he really wants to sign for you. It's just not quite where it wants to be. So he's hoping that you then, push the club to improve that offer. There's so many different parameters around it. But again, that first week's usually very, very busy. Then you get probably 2 or 3 weeks where it just cools off a little bit, where everyone goes on holiday. Everyone tries to have a little bit of time with their families. You still get... it depends on what level you work at. If I'm being really honest, when I was working in League 2, you used to have to do virtually everything. My wife names every holiday we had then after a player that I was honestly. Because I would spend virtually, on one of the days, I'd spend virtually the whole day trying to sign the player. And there's been players I've tried to sign at the start of the holiday, and literally by the end of the holiday, the players turned us down on the last day, and you're thinking, wow, what like absolutely. And I'm walking around the pool. I'm walking off for a cut. I'll go and get the coffees, love. I'll go and get them, knowing that I can have half an hour on the phone where she's not. But, you know, and that's part of being a manager, isn't it? And that's part of, I suppose, you know, being married to a manager as well, or having a dad who's a manager, because, you know, they probably get 10% of your time, even in the summer, where most people can literally, when you send an email to someone and it says, I'm currently out of the office at the moment, and you think, wow, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Because you have to be 24/7 as a football manager. And like I said, I think that's changing with the levels. I think the higher up you go, actually, there's a lot of other people that do that work for you. But
Yeah.
there's still a big draw over the summer. You know, you have to try and get away. You have to try and spend time with your family. But that is still interspersed with, you know, a lot of duties. You know, if I'm trying to sign a player, someone sends me a player, I've got to then watch as much as I can of that player. So you're up early trying to watch a little bit of footage before everyone else gets up, you know, and in and around the day. And, you know, watching 5 or 6 games of football, you can work out, isn't a quick thing to do.
Do some of these players get better as the all-inclusive produce gets consumed through the day, that suddenly their best bits on Wisecout have become even better? Let's double sign them.
Well, Dave, hence why I said early in the morning.
Okay, right.
Many a player probably got a slightly better contract at Burton Albion on the back of ringing up. Well, again, the agent, if they're sensible, they'd ring up about 7, 8 o'clock at night, wouldn't they? In the hope of negotiating a little bit more lubricated by alcohol. So yeah, look, I think, you know, there's so many different things. Well, you know yourself. I mean, think about it from a performance point of view. You know, you're still monitoring the work that players are doing. You're still, I suppose, having to plan for pre-season in different ways. So, you know, do you get you don't get weeks and weeks off where you have to do nothing, do you? Let's be really honest.
No, there used to be a time when you'd print out the close season program, put it in an envelope, give it to the player. Then they'd leave. Then you'd have to re-give it to the player because he left it strategically behind. So you'd have to go to his house and give it to him again. Whereas nowadays it's all digital. However, it doesn't stop players having support needs around. I'm currently on an island in the middle of South Asia. I don't have anywhere to run. What should I do? And those are the types of challenges. You know, I've had a player recently. I can't do any of the close season program because I'm on a 3-week safari in Africa, and it's like, right, these are new challenges. We didn't have these before when players were literally just going to Ibiza, and you know the challenge there was, were they going to be hydrated enough with the right type of fluids before they were doing whatever exercise.
Surely just get out the safari jeep. Like that surely you're going to have to run a lot.
That's a speed session, isn't it? You know, mixed with some agility, because if that's chasing you, you better move quick. But yeah, it's the same for us. And obviously, as signings have become more about, as you just said it before, the data, the contacts, getting background information, medical information, we now become part of that kind of network of people who are consistently working throughout that close season period while you're trying to relax, but you're also having to help with players who are leaving, players who are still with you who need support, and new players who are coming in because whatever their close season program may have been from their previous club, you now have to support them with the new close season program that you want to give them, which might have a different kind of emphasis, you know. So there are challenges as well. And I suppose it's also ensuring that players now do the work, because so many of them have decided that they're going to use close season camps that are run by private people, organizations who are going to run camps in, whether it's in Spain or Portugal or Italy or wherever it is, that the players feel can get them more football ready before the end of the season. So then we're fielding questions from those type of people, those practitioners who want to support the players. So yeah, there's certainly an expectation of the players also to do their work, but we're trying to balance that with giving them time to refresh themselves and spend time with their families as well, aren't they? But long gone are the days when they can turn back up at the start of pre-season in any way, shape or form unfit. So
That's
a big difference from maybe when you were playing, when closed seasons were different.
We just had the closed season. Yeah, you literally just had, let's say it was 6 weeks, 7 weeks, or whatever it was. It was like, right, get back in 7 weeks' time. But you knew. But the difference with that was, like, anyone who had half a brain or common sense. I mean, some players didn't, because they didn't want to do anything, and they'd rather suffer pre-season horribly and be in a position where they're okay because they'd had a break mentally and physically. I was always different to that. I knew what was coming pre-season. I always wanted to make that easier for myself. I always felt as I wanted to try to go back better. That was always my remit, to always try to go back better. So I would give myself 2 weeks off, complete rest, do absolutely nothing, really have a blowout. And then after those 2 weeks, I'd start running. I'd start doing work. And, to different degrees, certainly in that last 2 or 3 weeks before you go back, you'd almost want to go back pretty fit because you knew it'd be tough. You knew it'd be tough because back then, obviously, the first day you would be running. You wouldn't have these sort of hybrid sessions where the fitness was gained through 4v4 games or through, the 11v11 intensity stuff after a week or whatever it was. You would be on the line running for like the whole morning. So
for a whole week, maybe two in some club cases.
Yeah, actually, I mean, when I first started playing, I would imagine just towards the start of that, but maybe finishing, you were coming to that period where, often for the first week, you wouldn't even see a ball, would you? Like, the ball would never come out on the first day. It would take 2 or 3 days to come out. Nowadays, that's the first thing the players see, isn't it? So I suppose the expectations change. And like you said, there's big business now. Camps in Dubai, camps in Mykonos in Greece, lots of different other places where players can have a holiday with their families and actually have some organised training. I mean, players are far more professional now in their outlook, aren't they? I mean, a lot of it's for Instagram, and most of it they're not actually doing any work, are they? But it looks like they are. But yeah, big business and a big change in mindset, I think, with players nowadays.
Yeah, well, we'll cover that more in the forthcoming episode on the close season and what it looks like. And we go into more depth on a lot of these things, like actually how do agents get hold of a manager's number so he can be disturbed if he's on Mykonos. So, yeah, great topic, and thanks to In the Club for sending it through. Another pivot. Thomas Cumberworth has asked, what is our approach to creating a high performance environment? And I suppose we have to kind of asterisk this with the range of high performance environments is vast, isn't it? From the very, very elite clubs who will have unlimited resources in some ways, down to some of the lower league clubs. But they can equally have a high performance environment given their situation, can't they? It's not the best clubs have got the best environments all the time. You can see some really, really productive and high performance environments with very, very little. Maybe because culture is good. Yeah,
I mean, Tom's asked that question. Tom's actually an ex-under-18 player for me at Derby, so Tom was a great lad. A player actually that would try to maximise himself, in everything he did. So I'm not surprised that he's asked that question. For me, I think it's different for everybody, isn't it? I mean, for me, it's always about trying to maximise what you have available. Like you said, Dave, I think it's trying to create a culture where people want to get better, have the opportunity to improve, enjoy coming into work every day. I know that's not always the case because of course, sometimes, the challenges are different. And trying to create a group and a team of staff and players that have the same goal, want to be the best, want to push forward, want to challenge each other. For me, that's a high performance environment, that people call it the no excuses culture or whatever that might be. But when I was a manager in League Two, I always said, why shouldn't we run the club like a Premier League club? Because people always say, it's League Two, you haven't got the money, you haven't got, but so what? So what? Aspire to do everything you can do to the level that you would do in the Premier League. And for me, That's a big thing. Learning is a big part for me. He's always learning, always trying to be better, always trying to be, humble and improve, and
Yeah.
enjoying it as well. And enjoying it as well, Dave. I think enjoyment's a big thing, isn't it? When we've had a lot of our success, it's when we've come into the office in the morning and everyone likes being in there. You're in there with your friends, you're in there with people you work with, and you enjoy working hard together and trying to create something. And so sometimes it's that journey, isn't it, that's really, really important rather than people often say the destination. So that would be it for me. Go on, give me your approach to a high performance environment, which of course is something that you spent a lot of time trying to build and I would presume thinking about.
Yeah, I think I start with, what have we got within the building in terms of human resource, physical resource, maybe financial resource. And then it's how far we can push that to each of those kind of aspects, push it to its limit, And on the human side, let's take the staff, for example, even if you're not the most qualified, even if you're not the most experienced, how are you pushing your capabilities to the max? Your level of thinking, your level of application, your level of detail, in order to see, can we collectively move the whole thing forward? And I think if you've got a mindset around trying to maximize yourself, and you talked about learning there, continually learning, looking for innovation. Are you a blue sky thinker, or are you somebody who's just come to work to kind of pick up a paycheck? Or are you trying to find new ways of doing things? Are you reflective on your practice and trying to be better at what you do? I think where you find those people, they exist in a high performance environment. Now, they might be in a high performance environment of one because they're the only person doing it, but at least they've got that kind of DNA of trying to be high performance. I think then when you've got more and more people who are being pushed to that level, that's the other thing, isn't it? You want somebody who's going to stimulate that and encourage that and maybe hold you to account on whether you're improving all the time. So, I know in normal business where people have had appraisals in the past and they've been kind of goal setting, but you want that all the time. You want to see that you're being pushed and you're being held account to get better. Otherwise, you can just stagnate, can't you? And that's probably one of the things that really can start to undermine a culture of winning and high performance is people are just stopped trying to be better. And of course, then if you get to the point where the financial resource or the physical resource you have available to you isn't giving you what you can, how can you find other ways of doing it? Don't take no as the kind of the answer and that's it. Is there finding a way around that? Again, innovation around how we can partner with sponsors or anything like that in order to get you the thing that you needed to take the program forward a little bit. So I think it all comes down to the person themselves. It starts with you as to whether you are a high performance individual. And I know there's plenty of other podcasts and that out there who focus on high performance. And I think that thread links with all the great people in lots of different industries. They were driven themselves to be better than they were yesterday. And they had a goal in mind about where they wanted to get to. And I think that's what you want. When you come in, I know there's a famous kind of YouTube clip where they talk about one of our jobs as such, and certainly yours as a kind of manager, head coach is, once you start driving that bus, you need to get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus in order for you to kind of move the whole thing forward. And very quickly, when you go into a club like we've done, you quickly recognize who are the people who are just passengers at the back. They're not helping you actually move forward. So that would probably be my take on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one thing that I didn't mention within that, and as you were talking about staff and people working together, one thing for me is passion. You can see someone straight away that has a passion for the job. And if you have a passion for the job, whether you're a player or a member of staff, you'll always look for ways to be better, won't you? There's got to be that real innate, intrinsic want to love the job and want to be better and be the best version you can be. And for me, passion is huge thing, because we always talk about skill and we always talk about ability and we always talk about all of those things, but actually someone even that's not even qualified to do it with passion can surpass someone who's, like you say, just on a journey where they're just happy to pick up a wage and be in a nice club with a nice tracksuit on, So yeah, passion for me would be one of the biggest things, and to try and find people to work with passion, I think is an enjoyable thing, So it's great to collaborate with people like that.
Yeah, it's a great question, I think, from Tom. Other people will have other takes as to what they take in it, but certainly trying to get it into like a 5-7 minute answer, that's probably some of the things that we'd probably look at.
Well, listen, Dave, I'm going to ask you the next question, because last time out I did my best. Well, you put best squad, but I actually did best teams. You've taken it a step further. I'm looking forward to this. So best 11 and best squad, if you want to, that you've worked with, I presume.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I bounced around a few clubs. I wasn't obviously good enough to play professional football, only because, I didn't have the scouts there at the time. Obviously, they just missed it. There's so many sob stories of people who've been missed because
Unfortunately,
scouts were never there at the right time. But I've got a story about that for another day. But, in terms of squads, players that I've worked with, I've been fortunate over my time, similar to yourself, to have been around some really, really talented players. So trying to narrow it down into 11 has been a bit of a challenge, but here goes. Right. So goalkeeper, really easy for me. Robert Green, who came through the academy at Norwich. So saw him move from academy player into the first team and then leave and go on to being like Premier League kind of stalwart for so many years at like West Ham. It ends up at Chelsea, lifting trophies as well. Plays for England. Outstanding goalkeeper. He was great because he could do unorthodox things. He would pull off saves that most goalkeepers wouldn't be able to save, because he just had that kind of natural ability to throw himself in the way of things, react. He wasn't necessarily like a super technical goalkeeper in some ways, but when it comes to keeping the ball out of the net, he just found a way. So there's a great save that he made in the playoff final against Birmingham years ago, where he managed to get his foot and his hand to both stop the ball at the same time in midair. So there you go. I'll link that clip at some stage. Right, the back four. So I'm playing like a 4-2-2-2. Right. Okay. So let's work this out. Right back.
Just overcomplicate. Yeah. Everyone who gets a chance to be a manager, just try to overcomplicate it. Go on.
There you go. Look, I've got to get lots of creative players on the pitch here, so that's it. Right back, Thomas Helveg, obviously Danish international, Danish captain, was with us at Norwich for a year. We weren't a particularly successful team, but he showed real quality. We probably got him he was just over the hill in terms of his stellar career when he was at AC and Inter Milan and playing for those teams, and at the World Cup and Euros. So, but a quality player, just unflappable when he had the ball at his feet. So he's decent. Left back was Adam Drury, who had a long period at Norwich. Best one-on-one defender, I think, or he could defend 2-on-1 on his own and still come away with the ball. So hard as nails. His kind of gentle personality belied kind of a real killer instinct, which I found out when I had to join in the 11-11s one day, and it absolutely leveled me. So, I've been on the end of one of those. Right. So my two centre-backs, I've got Craig Fleming, started at Oldham and obviously was at Norwich for a long time. Not the tallest centre-back, but his reading of his game, his speed, his leadership as well, top end. So yeah, I had 9 years working with Flem as a player, so unbelievably durable as well, so 45, 46 game seasons, no problem to him. Now partnering him is a player. So Big man, little man at the back. Yeah. So my other centre back is also a striker. So I'm loading up on set plays here. So I've got Dion Dublin playing at the back. So we had him at Norwich at the end of his career. He started at Norwich, but I wasn't there then because I was like probably about 4. But Dion actually played as a centre back, and again, just reading a game, his talent, and obviously his goal scoring threat as well. I think that gives me an additional way of like winning games. I think with Dion in the team.
I'm going to be happy playing at the back, though, is he?
It doesn't matter, he'll just end up, bossing the game anyway. And what a leader to have on the pitch as well. We all know about his Manchester United times, but also when he was at Coventry, when he was at Villa as well, he was like a top end striker and again played for England. Right, another international then in midfield, Gary Holt, named 3 lungs. So that tells you kind of about his ability to get around the pitch. He could cover ground for fun, hard tackling. He did that. He knew what his limitations were. He knew what his strengths were. When he got the ball, he gave it to other people who were, as he would admit, better footballers. But he knew what he was there to do, which was win the ball back and give it to those guys. So quite often he would let other players be able to run out of position because he could just read the game so well. And then beside him is kind of the antithesis of him is Tom Huddleston. So we had Tom, didn't we, for a year at Derby. So Huds gets in there because what a passer. I mean, to feed these front players, I need somebody who can get hold of the ball and ping some balls about. And Huds ain't bad at that, is he? We saw him close hand.
Yeah, incredible long pass.
2 wide players, one who's not going to be happy about playing wide because he's going to tell us as well. He's going to argue about it the whole time and say he should be playing up front and being captain and probably being goal.
Well, Craig Bellamy. I guess this one. Have I worked with him?
Don't think so.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
No, Craig Bellamy.
I thought you were talking about Clinton. I thought you were talking about Clinton for a second.
No. We'll get to the strikers in a minute, but we're going to have to disappoint Clinton. But yeah, Craig Bellamy on the wing, what a talent again. His career at the top end, starts at Norwich, ends up at Newcastle, Liverpool, Coventry. He's a top player, wasn't he? And obviously now making his way into coaching and management at Burnley with Vincent Kompany. But as a young player, wow, what a pain in the backside he was. Like super driven, but what a talent. So yeah, Bella's one side, and then probably the fittest player I've ever worked with goes on the other side. Not just fit, but great attacking player. So Darren Huckabee gets in on the other side. What a dribbler, good goal scorer. Wouldn't defend, but you didn't bring him into the team to defend. You brought him into attack. So, what was it they used to say about him? Too good for the championship, just not good enough to be at the top end of the Premier League. But real top player, Hux. And I've worked with nobody as fit, like ridiculous when it came to churning out games and all the kind of metrics that we'd love on the physical side. He could do them. Front 2, Crouchy makes it in, even though he was only with us at Norwich for a short time. And obviously we worked with him at Stoke. So I saw him at both ends of his career. Like, what a goal scorer in the Premier League. And with those 2 whippets going down the wing, I think we're going to be able to cross some balls in for Crouchy to be able to deal with. But also, if we need to play forward, the big man, he's going to flick things on, isn't he? He's going to hold it up quite well for us. And playing in partnership with Dean Ashton.
Oh, wow.
So Dean Ashton then makes it in as the last member of the team in that formation. Again, what a talented player. Real unfortunate with the way his career ended with his ankle injury, because I think he was only destined for like top end of the Premier League or even abroad. Really good player. So that's my 11.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, listen, I'd love to hear your bench, but nowadays with 9 on the bench, it's going to take too long to rattle them all off. You could say them quick.
Right. Okay. So people can choose whether these guys get ahead. So you got Darren Bent, Rob Earnshaw, Ewan Roberts, John Hartson, Scott Parker, Tony Cotty,
Wow.
Matty Svensson, David Bentley, Mikhail Antonio, who is the only player I had when we were at Colchester. He came out on loan. We got Damari Gray, Joe Allen, Darren Fletcher. Fletch, he's won the Champions League, won the Premier League. Matty Vidra, Curtis Davis, what a defender Curtis was as well. Clinton, he won't stop talking about the fact he ain't made this team, but he can argue with the other guys. And then you've got two great goalkeepers. You got Thomas Cusack and you've got Jack Butland as well. So there you go. That's the full squad. I've got a whole squad and people not even getting in the squad.
I only did an 11. You've done about 28 players there in yours. By the way, if anyone would swap some of those bench for Dave's 11, starting 11, please, put your comments forward. But all I would say is he only had about two defenders in the whole team. So that basically tells you. That's why Dave and I work together, because it's the yin and the yang. I'd go far more. So,
yeah.
Anyway, team Dave, yeah, brilliant team, mate.
There you go. It's not a bad team, is it? We got. I'm pretty sure they're nearly all internationals and that. So I've been really fortunate, in my time to work with good players. Good players make us look good as well at times, don't they?
There you go. I wonder how many teams we'd get into. Some of those players. That'd be even more interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if even like the backroom staff of some of these lads, but there you are. Right, let's get back onto it. Right, great question here from Sam Turner, 1875. And the 1875 probably tells you where this is coming from. He's a Birmingham supporter, I assume. And his question is in relation to Birmingham. What was the aim of the 16-17 season, the 2016-2017 season at Birmingham? Do you believe that playoff football was achievable with the squad you had?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the plan. I think the season we got there, we went from second from bottom to 10th very quickly. The second season, I think we didn't come out the top 10 the whole season, finished 10th. And then the third season, I think when we left, we were in the top 6, maybe just dropped out, but we're in the top 6 for the majority of that sort of opening spell. So, yeah, I think that was always the plan. We had some excellent, I think that window, I think it was a January window actually, was probably the start of it, because we had some excellent targets lined up. I think we had Aaron Moy was a potential signing at the time. I think Johnny Russell at the time. I think we had a couple of other good signings lined up, and it was the first. Bear in mind when we first went in there, we only had. I could bring one player in on £5,000 a week. Now I know that's a lot of money, but back in the day in the Championship, it wasn't a lot of money, and that was when we brought Michael Morrison, of course, and what a player Morrow turned out to be for the club.
Absolutely,
for us,
yeah.
It was the first. That January was the first time we had an opportunity to truly strengthen the team, and we had a really solid team full of good players. I mean, if you think about the forward line, the likes of Damari, the likes of Shay Adams, who we'd not long signed, Clayton Donaldson, Dave Cottrell, Jack Magoma. So we had some really, John Terrell, I think we might have signed Diego around that time. So actually, when you look back, we had some really talented forward players.
Yeah.
And that was probably the first time I actually felt as though we could seriously kick on it. It felt to me like it was only a matter of time before we took the next step, which probably was getting in the top 6, and pushing on from there, hopefully. So yeah, it's really exciting plans for that season. And like I said, we ended up leaving before we had an opportunity to try to take the next step, which was that January. And I think that was the issue in the catalyst. I think there was all this money potentially available now. Well, I say all this money, but a lot more. And so people had ideas of grandeur around what they needed to do with that money, rather than give us that opportunity to actually build and see if we could take it a step further. So yeah, exciting plans for that season. Thanks for that question, Sam. But unfortunately, as history has seen, we'll never know. That was the idea. That was the plan.
I think that's one of the real challenges, isn't it, as a manager, where you're assembling your squad each year. You're removing something that needs improving. You bring in something better, and hopefully then it all starts to mesh into getting you towards where you want. And it was almost 2 years, wasn't it? Just over 2 years where you're starting to get the squad from where it was to where you want it to be, and then ready to kick on. And then, time conspires, events conspire to mean that, that's changed, isn't it? But the work that's gone in before that to get you to the point where it is starting to show some of those shoots of positivity, and maybe more than that, it was actually growing towards being a top 6 challenge that year, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's like anything, isn't it? When you haven't got a massive budget, particularly in the Championship, and we found the same thing at Millwall, you can't just jump from there to there. It's absolutely impossible. You can try, and sometimes when you try, you also risk dropping down to there if it doesn't work. So my feeling with a club like Birmingham and a club like Millwall is always the same. You have to try to build and layer in little bits that are just gradually better, because you can't go and buy a player that instantly solves your problem. You can't go and buy a 25-goal striker because you haven't got the money. So you have to either develop that player, or you have to try to find ways to incrementally improve. And also, your culture is so important at clubs like that. And so therefore you can't just go and bring 8 players in and change that culture completely, because you lose what you're good at and you lose what you have. So there always has to be a really small step change, which I know sometimes fans want to get there instantly. But for me, if you can just build each season, and of course you want to take the next step as quickly as you can, but it's not always possible. So Birmingham was like that. We'd had 2 and a little bit seasons there where I felt we'd built very, very strongly. We were better every single season. We started to get better players, start to beat some of the top teams. So yeah, we'll never know. But yeah, certainly an exciting team and an exciting season. And of course, we still speak to some of those players now, don't we? Because there was a real great spirit within that team.
I think that was one of the main things, wasn't it? Like, I know we've spoke about it earlier in this episode, but the culture was so positive, wasn't it? Everybody was on this positive streak where I think everybody could feel it within the building, couldn't he? Like, something good's happening here. And as you just said, unfortunately, we'll never know. It was a sliding doors moment, maybe for a lot of people at that one. But yeah, great question, Sam. So thanks for sending that in. Absolute change attack here. This one comes from Bobby Brand, and Bobby's been really observant here. He's seen that during the game sometimes players come over and they're given some tablets by the medical staff. And his question is, do those tablets really act that fast when they're given them during a match? And then further to that is, what's the actual drug testing screening process like for players? So maybe I'm going to have to answer this question myself.
I'll answer that one. Yeah, go for it.
Right. So, yes, I mean, the players will come over during a game and they'll ask for sometimes paracetamol or something like that, or maybe an ibuprofen to help them get through. Maybe they've taken a kick. Maybe they've got a headache or something that's come on during the game, because, they're not robotic, are they, players? Like, sometimes I know we see them roll around on the pitch when they've had a tackle, and you think, oh, they're just being like big babies or the play acting. But sometimes some of these whacks really do hurt, don't they? So certainly we can't give them anything stronger while they're on the pitch. So yeah, just giving them some of those things. Maybe they act as a placebo, but maybe over time then they actually do get some of the benefits of the pain-killing effects of some of the tablets that they're given. Sometimes also we'll see players who've got stomach upset because of some of the supplementation or maybe the food that they've had before the game. It then manifests itself into they have stomach upset. So often we'll give them like Imodium tablets or something like that to calm down like stomachs that are upset. So it's not always that they're taking painkillers. They can be taking other things for other reasons during the game. More often than not now, you also see them taking some supplements on board. So they might be taking some caffeine gum, or they might be taking a gel or something like that. So it's not always painkillers that they're taking. And then just onto we know this one for sure, don't we? When the drug testers turn up at the game, we know it's part of the game, but when you're sat on the couch 2.5 hours after the game, because they have to produce a certain sample, it's a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pain in the backside. I mean, you literally, I mean, I've had it with playoff games where there's no other games on. So they turn up virtually every couple of days or for all the games. And it is quite disruptive. And obviously they've got to do the job. You understand that. But and I think good people and good protocols mean that, they have to do their job. You accept it, but they also understand our job after a game. But yeah, there's quite a lot goes on in there. I suppose what would be the sort of normal protocol then? So a player comes off. So are they informed beforehand? When a player comes off the pitch, does he know that he's going? How does it work, Dave?
Yeah, so essentially nobody knows that the drug testers are turning up. They will just turn up at a stadium. So they'll normally turn up after the game has started, so that there's no chance for people to drop out of a team or be deselected or whatever in order for them to avoid being drug tested. So they'll suddenly appear, and then sometime in the first half, both benches, both medical staff will be informed of the fact that the UK anti-doping have turned up on behalf of the FA, and that they're going to be doing some dope testing or some screening. Then randomly select normally 2 players from the 2 squads that have been submitted. So players who haven't been selected in the squad are now not subject to the testing on that day, but anybody who's named on the team sheet essentially becomes available for testing, and then they will randomly pick 2 players from the test. Now, normally they will try and always get at least one who's in the starting team. So they won't normally pick 2 players from the bench. There'll always be a player who's in the team. And then straight at the end of the game, they will walk up to the players they're coming off the pitch and take them away. And they don't go into the dressing room. They're taken away to a drug screening room, which is now part and parcel of every club and every stadium. They go in there. And to be fair to UK Anti-Doping, they've changed the protocol in recent years because people like ourselves were really frustrated at the end of the games that we couldn't run. Like, you couldn't speak to the players because there were 2 or 3 of them missing. So the post-match analysis that a manager might want to give has been removed. Or some of the protocols that we might want to do regarding recovery had to be stopped because the players are off doing drug testing. And in recent years, they've allowed them to come back in now. So quite often, we'll have to wait a few minutes while they sign the paperwork. And then you'll have a couple of extra guests listening to your post-match analysis. So when you're losing your head or not, as the case may be, you've got 2 guys with clipboards sat there.
That'd be interesting what story they would tell on that evening when they go out for a few drinks with friends, wouldn't it? I went into a dressing room today to do drug testing, and one of the managers was going absolutely crazy. He's a madhead. So, yeah, it would be quite interesting, wouldn't it, to see their take on it. But, yeah, it's been quite consistent, hasn't it? I think they've got a job to do, and you respect that. And I think there's been times early on where you felt like they weren't respectful of the job that we had to do as well after a game. But I understand they have to make sure their protocols are adhered to first, because obviously that's what they're there to do. So I think it's a lot better now. Good question though. So then a lot of people wouldn't understand what would go on, would they, when they'd see those guys with the blue vests on and the clipboards maybe waiting by the tunnel.
That's it. Well, yeah, once you finish talking, though, it hasn't finished there, has it? Now the players have to actually produce a urine sample.
Yeah.
But of course, most of the time they're dehydrated. So they're trying to drink, but it then becomes this kind of almost game of Russian roulette, because when they have to produce a certain volume in the sample, but if they go too early, that's it. They may not produce enough and they can't leave until they've done enough. And that's when...
Bide your time. You've got to be patient, haven't you? You can't try and beat it. Well, I was going to say cocky. That probably wouldn't be the best thing to say, but they can't. Yeah, certainly got to be patient, shall we say?
Yeah, got to be patient. Otherwise, there's a coach full of people who are waiting for you to go to the toilet, after the game. Produces them.
That's what the medical car's there for. Yeah,
that's a modern addition to football.
Yeah,
the medical card that will now bus you home.
There you go. Someone's got to do it.
Anyway, a great question, and thanks for that, Bobby. Drugs and tablets during games. Anyway, we're on to Paul Singh, 1870. I think it's another Birmingham question, but it's not about Birmingham. I think it's a Birmingham fan, but it's what advice would you give a young, aspiring football manager who won't have the typical route into elite sports, having not had the playing career? So I think it's, if you've not played the game, can you manage at the top of the game?
Yeah, I think we see so many routes into the game now. As a coach, I think as a manager, as a sporting director, which we spoke about before in a previous episode, I don't think necessarily people have to have played the game. I know there's sometimes that innate feeling within the game that, if you've played it, you've got a better feel for it and all of that. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, so many of it is about all the other things around it, all the other parameters. Actually, something who hasn't played the game might have more benefit from. And we've seen some very good examples, haven't we? Probably not completely perfect examples in like a Mourinho where he hasn't played at the top level, but I think his dad was a manager and he'd been involved in football, so essentially has been involved in football. Someone like a Wenger, look at someone like a Nagelsmann who's not played a lot, I don't think, or a high level. But so you've got so many examples of people that have come through without being a top player, without necessarily playing the game. So I don't think that stops you. I think really it's about putting the hours and putting the time in, and for me, if you want to be a top coach or just have a career in the game, something that you love, because that's of course what a lot of people want to do. You have to put the hours in, you have to put the time in. Some of my most valuable experiences were doing the under 14s for Derby County and doing 2 sessions. I think we did a Tuesday session, a Thursday session, a Saturday morning session, and then a game on a Sunday. And making those mistakes, getting a session wrong, realising you weren't quite as organised as you needed to be, doing a session that just doesn't work, where you look at the players and they're not particularly motivated doing it, and there isn't enough challenge within the session, or it's not realistic enough. So you only learn that by getting on the grass and working. And I think that's the first thing, put the hours in. If you want to be good at anything, you have to put the hours in, as we all know. And then, I suppose, learn some of the other things around it. Again, that was something I tried to do. Learn about, team dynamics, learn about psychology. You're dealing with people. That's what you want to do. You want to deal with people, so you have to understand people, or at least how people are motivated.
Yeah.
So that's massively crucial. And then I think the last thing with it really is just try and get in a club. Because that's the hardest bit. I think so many people coach locally, coach, like a youth team or whatever, and it's so hard to then translate that into a career, which is what most people want. So I think the challenge is get into a club, get into like a community scheme, get into an academy if you can. Like if you're a good coach and you work hard enough and you put the hours in, eventually you will work your way up if you're patient enough. I think the challenge for most young coaches are you can do that for maybe 2 or 3 years and it just doesn't pay enough to be a career. So there's probably a window for a lot of people of maybe 5-10 years of trying, and then most people have to go and get a proper job. They have to go and work for a living. So I empathise with that. But I think the only route in, there is no set pattern, but I think the only route in is go to courses, network, do the hours, do the work, learn your craft, and then try to get into a club or a community scheme somewhere, where you might have a chance to rise the ranks. That would be my advice. It's pretty simplistic, but there is no real other way of doing it if you want to make a living out of it. If you just want to be a good coach, then that's fine. Just put the hours in, learn, be diligent. Try to be the best you can be, even if you're coaching a park team under 10. It's just as important. But yeah, to get a career in it's quite difficult because there's not that many jobs around. There's a lot more jobs now than there used to be. That's what I would say. You think when we first started out, there was hardly anything, was there? Now there's a lot of organisations. So yeah. What about you? Is there anything you would add to that, Dave, in terms of that?
No, I think it comes back to what we started talking about earlier in the episode, where we talked about having that passion, doesn't it? If you've got a passion for it, you will do the time and you'll do the extra work that you need to do. But there's no doubt about it that you need to also start to think about what does coaching at that level now look like, and there's different routes into it. So a lot of coaches now might be focused on a particular part of the game. So yes, you might have head coaches now who are overseeing it, but you're also seeing the compartmentalization, if that's not the biggest word we've had so far. But, you could be an attacking coach, a defensive coach, you could be a set play coach, you could be a restart coach. You can find something that you can focus on. And a lot of the people who are filling those roles aren't necessarily ex-players. They're people who understand the game really, really well. And they've done the amount of kind of background research and learning to allow them to become specialists in a part of the game. Or we've also seen, as you said, in new roles and these more creative roles we're seeing, you can become an individual coach, or a coach that's focused on transition of players between different age groups. So there's certainly opportunities out there. But at some stage, you've got to find a way in, and that might be starting in an academy at a club, and finding your route that way. There's plenty of examples of people who've worked their way up. Let's be honest, Ajax have always had that as part of their mantra, isn't it? If you want to be an Ajax coach, you start at the bottom with the young kids and you work your way up through. And there's no real way around that. If you want to come through their system, you've got to have done that kind of pathway as a coach. There's a pathway for a player, and maybe there also needs to be a pathway for coaches. But I'd say that's probably the best way, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd agree with that. I think there's no easy way to do it. But like you say, if you're passionate about something, you find a way. It's a shame because there's probably a lot of people that end up having to drop it as a sort of a career because they just can't make enough money out of it or can't find the right role, and that's a shame. But like you say, there's so many ways in. Data's massive now, so if you have an understanding of data and you want to be a coach, there's ways of sort of trying to maybe combine that. So you go in a different route. But yeah, there's lots more opportunities now, and that's probably the best advice we could offer.
Well, that's probably going to bring us to the end of this episode here. Another great question there from Paul around management, but I think we've covered a lot of topics this week, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been some good ones, really good ones. Interesting to see or hear your team. Would hope there's not too many of those players on the bench now messaging in with expletives for you, saying, I can't believe I couldn't make. At least at that point, it's not my fault that they're not playing. At least you can get the blame and see how you deal with those 9 bad eggs that you're going to find in the next hour messaging you. Well, it's not quite live yet. Maybe not in the next hour, but yeah, I'm looking forward to see how you deal with that, Dave.
Yeah, well, I think most of them would probably have to just accept it, because they're just going to get bullied into it. So that's it. They've just got to take it. They're a member of a squad, and we all win together, lads. We all win together. Until next time. Thanks for that, Gary. It's been another great episode of Whistleblowers. Looking forward to the next one already.
Okay, Dave. Thanks.